Hey, this is Bernadette McClelland, and welcome to The Influence Gap. This is the show where leaders come to close the gap between intention and impact so that they can have the right conversations, make the right decisions, and achieve the results that matter the most. Hey, welcome to this week's episode of The Influence Gap, and you are going to love today's guest. I have an amazing conversation with Carol Cooke. Carol is not only my friend from Australia, but Carol is also an elite athlete. So her story is amazing. She's going to share it with us, and it's going to relate to leadership. It's going to relate to high performance, as you can imagine. It's going to relate to elite performance. But you know, coming from Canada to Australia, it's a long way, let alone getting to Australia and being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And if that's not enough, she completely shifted who she was and ended up winning 3 Olympic gold medals in the Paralympics, 9 world championships, and at 60, she stood on the podium at the Japan Paralympics and took out silver. Now, most people will think silver, but wait until you hear her story about how she reframed silver. So let's get into this conversation. You're going to love it as much as I did. Let's go. So here we are, Carol Cooke, all the way from Melbourne, Australia. How are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, going well over here. And
you haven't lost the accent though.
Oh,
What's going
no.
on?
No, and I won't either. I seriously won't. But hey, look, this is all about you, and I can't wait for people to hear that the people who listen to this show are typically business owners, sales leaders, high-performing salespeople, and you fit into that category, but in a different lane. So I cannot wait to talk with you today, to have a conversation with you today, so that you can share your secrets to high performance. Because let's face it, 3 gold medals, 9 world championships. What else does Carol Cooke have to share with us?
Hey, look, don't forget the silver medal, because I was 60 when I got that one. So
now, I did. I read that you actually stood on the podium in Tokyo at 60 years of age, and that was a silver medal, was it?
It was. And to be honest, I was disappointed at first. And I remember standing there and looking down at this medal going, silver. I wanted a 3-peat, right? And then I looked to my left to the German woman standing on the gold medal spot. Now, I've been racing her since 2011. Now, we're now talking 2021, okay? And she had never beat me, and she'd finally won, and it's at the biggest sporting venue in the world. And I looked at her, and it dawned on me, I was thinking, she's 31 years old, and I'm 60. And I looked down at my medal again, and I went, nah, this is my gold medal moment. So, you know, I think of that as just as amazing as the other 3 medals.
And so you should. 60 years of age. You know, what I was doing at 60, 2 weeks before, I was sliding into the Cathedral de Santiago de Compostela after walking the Camino.
Yeah.
And I had these big visions, almost like standing on the podium.
Yeah, definitely. That's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, but I limped in with blisters and then just looked for the nearest bar. But the thing is, then it was the next day I went back and I stood in that moment looking at the cathedral, kind of like you. It's like, wow, it's the journey. It's not necessarily the destination.
Exactly. And that's something I learned from my sister, believe it or not. Yeah.
So here is what I'd love to have this conversation about today. You started off in Canada.
Yes.
Now, you had 14 years in law enforcement.
Yes.
And 4 of those were undercover.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable. And then you packed up and you came across to Australia.
Yeah.
Now, it was after that that your whole life changed.
It certainly did.
So share that story with our listeners.
Well, it was, I'd been in Australia for 4 years. I'd been married for three. And it was like life was, it's always those things. Life was going great guns. We'd bought a house the year before, and my career, I was climbing the corporate ladder with Australia Post. My husband's work was going well, and we had a 6-month-old puppy. It was like life was great. It was starting to finally go somewhere, and since moving to Australia, and it was the 23rd of April 1998,
Mm.
and I had had some really unusual symptoms for about 3 months, where I'd wake up feeling, even after 8 hours sleep, just so fatigued that I couldn't get out of bed. At the beginning, I thought I was coming down with the flu. I just didn't feel right, and my balance was off, and my eyesight had gone a bit wonky. I was seeing a bit of double vision, and then at times it felt like my eyes were shaking side to side, and I would look at Russ and go, "Look at my eyes, they're moving." He'd look at me like I was nuts, and he'd say, "No, they're not." So my doctor thought I had an inner ear infection. But because nothing was working, he sent me to a neurologist, and he'd sent me for some tests. And so this is the day that I was going back for the test results. And I remember I'm driving, it was a beautiful sunny day. And I felt like a fraud going to see him because overnight, all my symptoms had disappeared. So I figured it was the infection, and finally the drugs had kicked in and got rid of it. And when I got there, he was very gruff when he opened the door to his office, and he's like, "Hurry up, come in here." And I'm thinking, yep, I'm wasting his time. Like he's thinking I'm nuts, right? He pointed to a big armchair in the corner of the room, and he was like, "Sit down." And I'm like, okay. And so I sat down like a little kid almost, and he pulled a big film out of an envelope, which was my MRI film, and he held it to the ceiling light, not looking at me at all. And he said, "Oh, you've got too many lesions on your brain for someone your age. So you've got multiple sclerosis, and basically your life as you know it's over. So I'd suggest you go home and put your affairs in order before you become incapacitated."
Really?
That was like getting hit by a bus. And I had specifically said to Russ, "Just go to work because there's nothing
Mm.
wrong. Like, I'm fine." And I sat there, and he wouldn't look at me. And I just said one word. I looked at him and I said, "What?" And he dropped his head, and he shook it side to side, and he said, "Oh, you heard me. You've got MS, so this silly sports stuff you do, you're going to have to stop doing that. You're going to have to quit work and go on a whole bunch of drugs. And to be honest, I got enough people to deal with MS, so you can go back to your own GP. He can look after you."
Unbelievable.
With that, he put the film back in the envelope, and he walked to the door. And he opened the door, and finally looking at me, he said, "Hurry up. I've got people waiting." And I think the worst part is that I got up in a complete stupor. I had one word going through my head: incapacitated. That
Mm.
was like the worst word he could have said. But as I walked towards him, he slammed the envelope into my chest and had the audacity to say, "See my secretary on the way out for your bill."
He had an
And,
issue. He clearly had an issue.
well, he was probably about 75. He shouldn't have been practicing.
Yeah.
And he was the first neurologist my GP could get me in to see. So,
Okay.
it was, yeah, needless to say, I never saw him again.
So,
And nor do I ever remember paying his bill
oh,
because I just walked
okay.
out.
I just keep forgetting that one. So there's two parts to that story I would love to dig down deep into. One, how scared were you?
Um, Look, I don't know if you would call it scared. I went into kind of, I guess you would say, survival mode. I
Mhm.
don't remember driving home, and I don't remember parking the car. the next thing I remember is sitting on the couch in tears, and our 6-month-old puppy jumped up onto my lap and started to whimper. And that snapped me out of that.
Mm.
And right then and there, I did something you should never do when you've heard traumatic news. And that was, I made decisions. So Russ is 10 years older than me. I was going to be incapacitated, which I went to the really dark side of the word that day, thinking it meant being bedridden 24/7, incapable of looking after myself in any way. And so I decided that I was giving Russ the house that we just bought. I was giving him a divorce, and I was going home to Canada so my family could look after me. And he phoned, and he says, "So how'd the appointment go?" I said, "I'm not going to discuss it on the phone. You need to come home." The poor guy had like over an hour on public transport to get home, thinking I was now dying. And I'm very lucky, because when he came home and I told him what had been said, and then I said, "Don't say anything. These are the decisions I've made." And I told him, like a good, and you would understand this, like a good Aussie bush boy, he looked and said, "You're an effing idiot."
Love it. Good on, right.
And but I said, "Haven't you heard what this man said?" And he said, "Well, he's a bigger one." He said, "We know nothing about this disease. How about we find out first before you make some decisions?" And then he said, probably the most, and I said this before, the most romantic thing that he's ever said to me. And it wasn't, "I love you." It was, "You don't have MS. We have it, and we'll deal with it."
Oh my gosh, I can.
And here we are 31 years later. So
okay, so you were 49 when you were diagnosed?
no. I was 36, almost 37.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay, got it. So, okay, so you've been this sports person, you've been a police officer, you've been a swimmer, a rower, and now you've got this news at 36. You're thinking incapacitation.
Yep.
From a reinvention perspective, I mean, we hear the word pivot, we hear the word evolve, we hear the word reinvention. You've gone from that to 3 gold medals at the Paralympics. So what is that identity shift, basically? Because it is an identity shift. There are people out there today that are struggling in some way, shape, or form, especially, either with health, relationships, or with business. What is that shift? Because when you get diagnosed with something like MS, most people do think my life is going to get smaller.
Yep. I guess, number one, my mom always told me I was born pig-headed and stubborn.
What I know about you, I think I'm on your mum's side.
But I think my mom also taught me a good lesson at the age of 9, when a really uncaring woman told me I was too fat to do gymnastics, and in front of a whole bunch of people. And that was I wanted to be an Olympic gymnast for Canada. So in one sentence, she crushed my dreams. But my mom picked me up, and she said, "Carol, never let anybody tell you what you can and can't do in life. If you want to keep doing gymnastics, then keep doing it." And then she said, "But if you want to go to the Olympics, why don't you try a different sport?" So in that moment, she was getting me to think outside the square and reframing my thinking to build my resilience. And so I've used that my entire life. And I guess I always like to say to people, what would you attempt to do if you knew you couldn't fail? And it was about taking advantage of opportunities. So I was still swimming as a master swimmer. So I decided, mom's lesson came in. This man was not going to tell me what I could and couldn't do. And so I kept swimming. I was swimming as a master swimmer. And then all of a sudden in 2005, the World Masters Games were in Canada. So it was just a good excuse to go home for a visit. But they also had para categories for the first time ever in swimming and athletics. And I started to think, oh, okay, so I wonder if I classify as a para swimmer. So I contacted Swimming Victoria here in Melbourne and went through the classification process, and I did. I actually classified as an S10 swimmer. So I went over and did, my swimming. And to be honest, there weren't that many of us in the para categories. So I ended up coming back with a swag of medals. And
Ah,
I got contacted by the Paralympic committee here in Australia. I got an email saying, "Oh, we heard that you did really well at the Masters Games in paraswimming, and we have a talent search day coming up." And I'm thinking, this man has no idea how old I am. I was 44 at the time. And I emailed him back and said, I'm not in my 20s, because talent search days usually range from kids with disabilities up to maybe mid 20s.
uh-huh.
And he said, "Oh, it doesn't matter, come along." And I think when I walked in, all these parents with their kids were going, "Where's your child?" And I'm like, "Hi, I'm here for the testing." And so I took advantage of that opportunity to try something different. And I didn't know where it would lead. I did the
Mm,
testing. 2 weeks later, got an email saying, "We want you to take up the sport of rowing." And that was my foray into rowing. And it was like, rowing? Okay.
wow.
Just from the testing and the sports scientists and whatnot. So took up rowing. 2 years later, made the national team, hoping to qualify for Beijing. And all of a sudden, we didn't. We missed by zero 0.8 of a second. So that was
Wow.
heartbreaking.
Right, okay, okay.
But it was then that my sister taught me that lesson about the journey and not the destination. Because I'd been writing a blog and taking people on this journey. And then I apologized to everybody for us not making it. And she sent me an email and said, "It's not about the destination. You've taken us on an amazing journey along the way." And she said, "If you like rowing, just keep rowing." And I went, little sisters can be smart sometimes. And so I kept rowing. We were sixth at the World Championships the following year. And we thought, yay, we're going to, by London, we're going to be really good. And then Rowing Australia dumped our crew. It was heartbreaking because the coach just didn't want to have a bar of us. He wanted the more disabled crews. They were
Mm,
already winning medals. And yeah. So what did I
yeah,
do? I
you bought
switched to cycling. I
I was
took
gonna
advantage
say
of opportunities.
I was gonna say you bought a tricycle.
Well, I had a trike made. It was a 22-kilo steel frame thing. It was so heavy, but I rode it from home to rowing training, just as
Mm,
some cross training. And one of the girls I'd been rowing with when the crew got dumped, she switched to cycling. And she called me and she goes, "Carol, there's a trike category in the Paralympics." This was April of 2011. She said, "You should come up to nationals in Queensland." Nationals? I can't ride at nationals. I've never done a race in my life. She goes, "Oh, just come up." And from my first ever race, which was a time trial, I had smashed the qualifying speed for my category, and I was on the team, on the national team. So I believe in life that, as we get older or things happen to us, we get very fearful. And
mm.
we have to look for those opportunities that we might never think we should do, but you should do, because if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But it can lead to something absolutely incredible.
I totally agree with you. Where do you see leaders today? Because you still, you know, what I mean, you're still in the business world as well. Where do you see leaders missing out on their whims, if you like, you bought that tricycle on a whim. Where do you see them missing out on opportunities?
I think if they're a leader and say somebody that's working below them comes to them with an idea and they dismiss it
Mm,
without even giving it a second thought, they're missing out there. I think there a lot of leaders are missing empathy, um, and missing out on things because of lack of communication.
mm,
There's in the sporting world, there is a huge lack of communication between the leaders that
mhm.
run sport, the administration type people that run sport, and the people who are actually doing it. And so I think that's probably the same in business. It's that lack of
Mhm.
communication between those levels and listening to the people that work for them.
And that doctor, the story you started off with was an absolute example of
Oh,
a leader who does not do that. So, what do you see? I mean, we've got elite sports people, we've got people out in the business world and the sales space, which is what most of our listeners are sales leaders and salespeople who are already performing at a really high level, at an elite level. And what do you think the difference is between someone like that and then someone who actually influences other people to get to that high level?
oh, good question.
Is it the same qualities
I
or is
think it is.
there something extra?
I think it is. Um, it would have been nice if you'd given me this question ahead of time.
No right or wrong answer.
But no, I think it is the same qualities. It doesn't matter how elite you are. Like I, yeah, I was an elite cyclist, but put it this way, you don't know what you don't know, right?
True.
And even at my position as somebody who's obviously made it, I've won some medals,
Mhm,
I've won world titles. I still don't know everything. So even
mhm,
me down here, I have to listen to the coaches and the sports scientists. So in business, even if you're in business, you might know everything, but you still have to listen to your leader,
mhm.
but it also works vice versa.
I love
So
it. I
when
love
I
that.
started, so when I started cycling, most of the coaches had never coached a trike. It's a
Mm,
completely different way to ride. Everybody looks at a tricycle and goes, "Oh, that'd be easy." Hardest thing I ever had to do was switch my brain from two wheels to three because it's completely different. And coaches were trying to get me to ride like they were coaching two wheels. And no matter what I said, they didn't get it. So I put them on the trike. So the communication goes both ways, right? So I put them on the trike. And then they went, "Oh my God, this is
yeah,
really hard." And
yeah.
that was on a flat surface. And I'm saying, okay, think about camber. So I
Mm,
think in business, you might run a business, you might be the CEO, and you've maybe come up through the ranks, but things change over the years. And I
yeah.
think you have to listen to the people who work with you and not just dismiss what they're saying, but it also goes vice versa. So a
Yeah.
coach will say, "No, I want you to do this, and this is why." Like
Mm,
maybe for me, it might be, a certain set that they want me to do for efforts. And I'm like, why the hell am I doing that? But they have to explain that. So I think communication is
yeah,
huge.
love it.
It
And
really.
I'm going to throw something else in there as well, that another C word, contribution. So
Mhm.
I'm going to throw that in as a differentiator. And I mean, contribution can show up in any which way, shape, or form as well. Um, you've been such an advocate for MS and for, well, the sporting world as well for decades.
Yep.
And so you have raised, correct me if I'm wrong, $11 million.
Well, I had help doing it.
Very,
Yes.
very good. But you've been contributing to
Yep.
that whole advocacy approach, which is contribution. And so I think that the difference between those that do lead or play or perform at a really elite level and those that influence other people in how to get there, it's also a contribution mindset as well.
Oh,
And
definitely.
yeah,
Definitely.
so
You
share
know,
that.
even if you're just a worker in a company
Mm,
or a salesperson, you still have to contribute to make
mm,
things work, you know? Even as CEO, you still have to contribute to make things work. We can't do it. You can't do it on your own. You can't just be that person that says, "Well, I'm not doing it this way. I'm going to go off and do it this way. I'm,
mm.
I'm I'm doing my own thing." You all have to contribute to make the business work,
Yeah,
and yeah. So
yeah.
contribute is a good word.
Yeah, contribution, and I think also, I mean, I think that falls into the category of generosity as well. Like, generosity of time, generosity of ideas, and just that ability to share, so that I mean, you may not be specifically going out to be an influence to somebody or for somebody, but I think purely by that contribution part of your personality coming out, it will automatically influence somebody somehow. And I think that's what you've been doing.
Yeah, and the other thing, when you look at generosity and contribution and communication, I just did a speaking gig at a mining company, and I looked up, their core values and whatnot online, and one of their core values was stronger together.
Mm.
Okay. And I was able to relate that to cycling. I might be an individual athlete, but I have a whole team around me that gets me to that start line that makes me win that medal. And together, we're stronger together. And so it worked really well. And so when you take that generosity, the communication, the contribution, and put it all together, we're all stronger together.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
thought that was a fabulous core value. And I think every business should have something like that.
Well, they do. They have them on the walls. They have these wonderful words
Yeah.
on the walls, but
But it's about doing it. It's not just words.
it's
Yeah.
totally, yeah, it's understanding what those words mean too. There's something that I encourage teams to do, and that is share in a meeting how you are living,
Yeah.
those values, or working with those values. Demonstrate it. Tell us, what have you done this week that's shown somebody that you're
Mhm.
aligned to the values of this organization.
Yeah, definitely.
So great stuff. So when we think about, we talk about who we once were and who we want to be. I guess there's that gap, and that gap can be, you can call that gap anything. I actually call it the gift of the gap, because I think that there is a gift that we have where we can shift who we once were, whether it's a leader, whether it's high performing sports athlete, a salesperson, whoever it is. That gap is where we can do the choosing, and
Oh,
we can
definitely.
choose to, that saying, you do you, I say you do new. So who is it that that you want to become? So what for you lives in that gap? For me, it's the influence gap, which is what the show's called. But for you, what lives in that influence gap?
Oh, geez. I'm in that gap right now. You know, I mean, I've had lots of gaps. I've gone from policing to unemployment to delivering parcels for Australia Post, and climbing that corporate ladder to then the gap of MS and not being able to work, and then sport. Now I retired January 11th
Yay,
last year.
congratulations to
Yeah,
you.
thanks. And but what now? And it's funny because the other day I was having dinner with another speaker, and I said to her, I said, I'm going to be 65 this year, and I love speaking. I do love speaking. But March was just nuts. I was on planes, off planes, on planes, off planes. And I thought, do I want to do this full time, or do
Interesting.
I just want to have a couple gigs a month and
Interesting.
then, do whatever I want? And so I'm caught right now in between. And then I had come up with an idea about a TV show, and trying to produce a TV show for women over 50 to,
Mm,
realize that a number attached to us doesn't define what we can and can't do. And speaking to women over 50 who have done just that. So
right.
I'm caught in that gap right now. So I can't even tell you what that's going to be. And I'm not rushing it, because I know that some opportunity will rear its ugly head, and I'll go, maybe I'll do that, you know? So yeah, I don't even know for
I love
myself,
it. I love it. So the
but I'm
influence.
not pushing it. I'm not pushing
No,
it.
and I think that's half the. I think that's half the. Well, I think that is the secret as well, is to give yourself grace, and
Yeah.
to not put the pressure on yourself. And I think a lot of leaders out there today are doing that. They're putting so much pressure on themselves because of the environment that we're in at the moment. And
Oh,
so,
and
yeah, and so for me, influence, I mean, the influence gap is really helping those leaders, you know, athletes, whoever it may be, is to really shift the needle when it comes to, you know, what is the message that they want to give to the world or to their team or to their business or whoever it may be, and and what's the gap between that message and the impact that they can make.
it's
And
perfect.
that's the influence gap, because it is in that space, and there's so many different, there's no right or wrong. You
No,
know,
definitely.
there's so many, and so everyone has their own interpretation of that. And leaders today are, you know, a lot of them are in that good space, and they want to get great. And it's like,
Yeah.
how do you shift the needle to go from good to great? So you are in the gap now, and you have this show. You're not going to put too much pressure on yourself, and you've got an impact that you want to make with women over 50. So
Yeah.
what is one thing you would love to be able to do to bridge that gap?
Oh, geez. One thing. I took one step to bridge that gap, and that was to do a course with a woman who actually has her own TV network in the States,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really good. So I have, you know, I've started on that journey of knowing what I have to do. It's deciding whether it's something I want to do.
Oh, nice distinction. Nice
Okay.
distinction.
So I think that's the one thing that I need to work out is what do I want? And right now I haven't worked that out.
And I just, you know, before we finish up, I really want to kind of zone in on those two words, needing and want. What do we need to do, and what do we want to do?
Yeah.
If we're in a space of needing to do something, we are in a space of scarcity and
Yeah. And
lack,
yeah.
because we are now in that need. There's this need to do something. And if you switch the words to want, it's a totally different energy.
Oh, definitely.
Totally.
Definitely.
So,
I look at it as like when I'm talking about women over 50, there's women over 50 who are in a job that they may be a CEO, or they may be some high flyer, and they may be making lots of money, or they might be just a worker making lots of money, but they hate going to work every day.
mhm, mhm.
So do you want to change that, or do you need to change that?
And
And
it's,
so there, you know,
yeah,
and I've come across a lot of women who have wanted to change that, so they have, you
yeah.
know,
And
um, and you
one's
have to decide
yeah,
if it's
one's
a
push,
want or a need.
one's pull. And
Yeah.
we want to be pulled along. So, look, I have loved this. Now, Carol, I know you said before, oh my gosh, Bernadette, I wish you had told me some of these questions, which I've told you none. But this is what I call rapid fire. And
Oh, geez, here we.
so, one word answer only.
Oh, one word. Okay.
Answer only. Are you ready? Strap
Okay.
in. Here we go. The quality that got you to the podium when talent alone would not have got you there. What is one word?
Commitment.
The thing that MS took from you that you are most grateful for.
I can't do it in one word. My old life.
That'll do. That'll do. I love that one. The word that describes the leader you were at 30 versus the leader you are now.
Terrible.
Okay, well we might put that label on that first doctor, but anyway. The one word every sales leader needs to hear right now, or the one word every sales leader needs more of right now.
Oh, again, commitment.
Okay, that'll do. Your influence gap in one word.
Oh, you got me here. I don't know. Knowing.
Knowing. Love it. That's a really good word. There you go. Pulled that one out of you, didn't I?
Oh, geez, did you ever?
Carol Cooke, AM, Order of Australia.
Yep.
Thank you so much for your time. How can people connect with you? And more importantly, how can they find out more of your story through your books?
Just through my website, which is just carolcooke.com.au. And Cook has an E on the end of it.
Yes, so. Cook does have an E on the end.
Carol doesn't. Cook does.
Carol, Carol, Cooke, Cooke.
Yeah.
And your books.
Yeah, they're on my website as well.
Beautiful. And your books are called The Force Within.
Was my first one. The Force Within, from police officer to Paralympian. And I collaborated on a third called Voices of the 21st Century, Women Empowered Through Passion and Purpose.
I love it. Carol Cooke, thank you so much for being on the Influence Gap today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And remember that influence really comes down to creating change within you so that you can create change around you. So on that note, have an amazing day, and we look forward to seeing you and having a conversation with you this time next week. Bye for now. That's a wrap on today's episode of The Influence Gap. If this resonated with you, share it with a CEO or a sales leader who you think needs to hear it. And make sure that you subscribe so that you never miss one single episode. If you are ready to close the gap between your message and the impact you want to make, come and find me at BernadetteMcClelland.com. I'll see you this time next week. Bye for now.